So, when I was a kid, my dad bought me this book, and it was called The Most Beautiful Places in the World to Travel. And as a kid, I'd flip through that book page by page and beg my parents, can we go here? Can we go here? But the most frequent place that my parents would take me was the farmer's market. Granted, it was a 20-minute drive, but it wasn't exactly where I wanted to be. And the thing is, whenever we would go there, my mom would just stand there talking to people for hours. We'd hardly buy anything. She would just stand there. One day I turned to her and I said, Mom, why can't we just buy our zucchinis and leave? Why do we have to stand here talking to people? And she turned to me and she said, I thought you said you wanted to travel. And that's when it hit me that the most important lesson that my parents taught me was that I didn't need to physically be somewhere to travel. I didn't need a plane ticket. I could mentally travel through other people's stories. So my mom and I developed a thing that we like to call people understanding. That's taking people watching to the next level. I developed a love of talking to people, not just for the sake of talking, but to see what makes their eyes light up, see what makes them tick. So storytelling is a fundamental part of society and culture. It's the way we transmit important information and values from one person to the next. It's a very primal form of communication because our artistic expressions tend to be very authentic. Actually, listening to a story lights up the same part of the brain as pleasure. And when you're actively listening and engaged into a story, according to MIT researchers, your brainwaves literally become in sync with the storyteller. So stories are important because they allow us to connect emotion to information. But just as stories and content have adapted through time, so have the mediums through which they travel. In 2010, Brandon Stanton created Humans of New York. For those of you who don't know what Humans of New York is, it's a photo blog series of portraits and interviews, giving the worldwide audience of the internet a glimpse into a stranger's life in New York. And let me tell you, this revolutionized storytelling, right? Because at one point, stories used to be passed down through lineages. I would tell my kids, they would tell their kids, and so on and so forth. But now, stories can be passed out through networks. Throughout my time here at the University of Michigan and School of Information, I've become interested in how storytelling can farther extend to political opinions and world perspectives. I find a parallel between storytelling and the virtual realm and seek to understand how information influences the way that we think. In a world where ideas are appearing more and more democratic and voices seem equal, I've learned one very important concept. If you're missing one piece of the story, you have a completely different narrative. I created Students of UMich as a freshman in college. It's a Facebook and Instagram blog that draws upon my love for storytelling by engaging in deeper conversation and emulating Brandon Stanton's blogging methods. It was originally a spur-of-the-moment decision. It allowed me to practice my portrait photography, get a little bit out of my comfort zone, and continue to mentally travel. It voiced diverse students' journeys as they chased their passions and became enmeshed in university life. But soon it started to pick up followers. Within the first year, I had about 2,000 followers. Little did I know it would take me so much more to realize what it means to mentally travel. I decided that I wanted to expand my blog to another platform, Twitter. But Twitter had a 140 character limit at the time, put in place to prevent users from getting overwhelmed with information. This was fantastic for decreasing information overload, but also decreased the amount of content I was able to post. I found it really difficult to have both the story, the context, and the details with the limited word count. In this, I found a trade-off between the integrity of the story and the character limit. Which brings me back to my point. If you're missing one piece of the story, you have a completely different narrative. My sophomore year, I decided to apply to be a photographer for the College of Engineering. I was motivated by their request for someone interested in storytelling because that was the first interest that I had seen outside my own. There I had a mentor who helped me develop a more illustrative, humanistic approach towards my portraiture through lighting techniques. So under the advice of senior multimedia producer Joseph Hsu, I developed #HerEngineering. It's a photo series that amplifies stories of resilience of female-identifying people in the College of Engineering. And these stories got personal. These stories got intimate. Actually, there was one point in time where the person I was interviewing started crying, so I put down the camera to give her space. After the interview, Joseph turned to me and he said, "Why'd you put the camera down?" Well, I wanted to give her space because at that time, I thought that the key to good storytelling was letting the other person feel comfortable. But if I'd kept the camera up, I could have captured the height of emotion. I could have really gotten to understand her on a deeper level. Now, this project was significant for me because it taught me to embrace discomfort. If I really wanted to travel through other people's stories, I needed to embrace discomfort. This includes awkward silences, moments where I can't think of what to say next, moments of crying. I learned to get both physically and mentally closer to the other person. In this, I found a trade-off between the integrity of the story and comfort. Which brings me back to my point, if you're missing one piece of the story, you have a completely different narrative. So getting a grasp of understanding the story in the physical realm, I began to question, how does it farther extend in the physical realm, or in the virtual realm? How does storytelling translate to the virtual realm, and how does it farther extend to political opinions and world perspectives? I started studying activist movements, those with big political divides. And what I found is that a lot of the information that we see online, the information that guides our emotions, may not be entirely accurate. There are usually several sides to the story, and framing can be a powerful tool. For example, in the Black Lives Matter movement, it was found that the Internet Research Agency, or the IRA, based in Russia, posted some of the more problematic and polarizing tweets, not real activists for or against the movement. So the Internet Research Agency, or the IRA, is a company in Russia organized in online influence operations for Russian businesses and political interests. These carefully crafted and maintained personas were used to impersonate politically active US citizens, people like you and me who care about the same things that we do, whichever side of the movement you're on. Now, the point of this was to put pressure on the fault lines of society, and though they didn't create political division by any means, they did work to amplify it. Now, take a look at these statistics above. Think about how intertwined it was into your feed without you even knowing. It's so easy to take on someone else's views without knowing their perspective or their background or their roots. Now, I do want to focus on framing inaccuracies rather than content inaccuracies, because it's actually the framing of this that inhibits us from seeing the whole story. And once again, if you're missing one piece of the story, you have a completely different narrative. In this, I found a trade-off between the integrity of the story and heightened emotion of the viewer. Now, I do want to go back to this distinction between content inaccuracies and framing inaccuracies. Though this was an example where the content may not have been entirely accurate, there are cases where framing can still be a very powerful tool, even when the content is creepily accurate. So, have you ever been on Facebook and Instagram and lost track of time while scrolling? I know I have, right? We think we'll be online for like 5 minutes and then an hour goes by. Users like myself become addicted to social media because we see what we like. We see recommended searches, suggestions, and posts ordered in a specific way because companies have predicted what you like and what will keep you online longer. The more time that you stay on their site, the more money that they make, even if you're not actually purchasing anything. This is because you're not the consumer of these sites. You're the product being sold. So data has become the newest form of currency. It's a powerful tool that's been able to define and label members of society, predict consumer behavior, and tweak algorithms to sell people to ideas. These algorithms that change your search feed are created through a labeling process. Filter bubbles are the ways that information gets filtered out to you based on your label. And the thing about this process is you don't get to choose your label. It's completely invisible to you. Therefore, you don't get to see what information is shown to you, nor why it's shown to you. Through machine learning algorithms, companies can keep track of every piece of data exhaust that contributes to understanding you as a whole. They can keep track of your values, your vulnerabilities, your subconscious thoughts, and so much more. And these predictions, they can be about when someone will pay their bills, when someone will get sick, or even when someone will become pregnant. There was a Target case that went out about Target being able to predict a pregnancy. It's so easy to find trends on the baby registry that women who are pregnant tend to buy more unscented lotions and supplements. So in this case, Target started sending a young woman ads for baby clothes and baby cribs. And the father got upset, not knowing that his daughter was pregnant, but later appalled that Target knew about the pregnancy before his daughter could tell him. Now, think about it. Is there a way where algorithms can know more about you than you know about you? So take Find My Friends, for example, or any location tracking application. They know where you are, that's standard. But take it a step farther. They know the speed at which you're going, if you're in a car, if you're biking, if you're walking. Take it a step farther. They know your frequent locations. If you're at a coffee shop, if you're at school, if you're at work, your daily routine. Take it a step farther. Are you a fast driver? Are you confident in your driving ability? Or are you a slow, apprehensive driver? Do you tend to speed up during turns? Are you a rash decision maker? What does all this tell about your personality? So with all this insight, it may help users, or it may help advertisers to be able to cater towards emotion as well. There's actually a new form of data collection out there that can be seen as a form of weaponization, specifically when it strategically targets vulnerable groups. It's about hitting you when you're most vulnerable. The use of data to make algorithms is inherently political. It becomes intertwined into this new field of technopolitics. And one of the biggest cases of this impact was the Cambridge Analytica scandal. For those of you who don't know what the Cambridge Analytica scandal is, Cambridge Analytica was an IT company accused of data breaching, harvesting, and manipulating Facebook users to swing their votes in favor of Trump during the 2016 elections. Now, this was a significant event because it showed how easy it can be for Facebook to harvest the data of millions of users to create sophisticated political profiles. Christopher Wiley, the man who created what can be deemed as a psychological warfare tool, was able to use these sophisticated profiles and target ads to work on your specific psychological makeup. In this, there's a trade-off between the integrity of the story and persuasive content. And though this didn't work to change any deeply held or pre-existing beliefs, it did work to amplify anxieties and resentments and create divides in social groups, as well as echo chambers. So hypothetically, if I was a liberal and I went online, I would keep seeing liberal-skewed posts. I wouldn't get to see the other side of the story. I would have fallen into what we call an echo chamber. Now, this is really common in the physical realm, where people tend to adopt the viewpoints of their family members or those they're physically close to. But now, it's happening online, in a place that was deemed democratic, and everyone's voices appeared equal. So if I keep seeing liberal-skewed posts, I'll become polarized to liberal methodologies. Now, this isn't to say that all algorithms or filter bubbles are bad. Sure, they can reduce information overload, personalize your search feed, and even predict dangers that might affect you. But this is to say that there's a trade-off between the integrity of the story and personalized content. And once again, if you're missing one piece of the story, you have a completely different narrative. With all this insight, I decided to bring it back to students of UMich. I wanted my blog to fit into this new realm of technopolitics. I wanted my stories to take people out of their echo chambers. I wanted to give them a perspective that they'd never heard before, that they'd never even experienced. And though I still act as a filtering mechanism to some extent, I aim to bring stories that have context, have discomfort, and aren't personalized or persuasive towards your comfort zone or taste. I started hitting more taboo topics. Now, I mentally traveled through other experiences which I couldn't have fathomed before. I got to understand what it means to have faith. I got to talk about growing up in a marginalized community, talking about sentiments before someone's father got deployed, talking about recovering from eating disorders, talking about nostalgia from the past, and even surviving sexual assault. I began to see storytelling as a means of getting out of my filter bubble. Through stories, I found a power. I found the power that people can commiserate with Syrian refugees and #MeToo marchers. They can rejoice with parents being reunited with their children after a long time. Stories have the power to allow people to participate as global citizens. And the struggles that were once deemed unfathomable slowly become ironically and enchantingly relatable. So after listening to all of these stories, I felt that a little piece of them became attached to me. Every story that I heard lingered in my head. They taught me a lesson. They humbled me, inspired me, perplexed me. They gave me confidence, and they gave me hope, and they helped me grow. I can't help but think back to my time holding my mom's hand through the farmer's market. But now I'm starting to understand what it means to have the full story. So let's talk about ways which you can see how you've been influenced. You can check your filter bubbles on Facebook and Instagram, and I actually have directions on how you can do that. You can pay attention to who's sending you ads and take note of that. You can follow people who you don't necessarily agree with, people on the opposite of the political spectrum. You can take the time to read the articles that you wouldn't normally open. You can actually view posts in chronological order on Facebook rather than the algorithmic order. And here's another way of how you can do that. And very importantly, remembering that privacy isn't about having something to hide. It's about protecting your free thinking. But more than that, I challenge all of you in the audience to step outside your filter bubbles. Get coffee with a random stranger. Introduce yourself to someone you've always wanted to talk to. Go to a presentation on a topic you're not familiar with. Embrace awkwardness and discomfort, and overcome your immediate reaction for hate and anger. Because once again, if you're missing one piece of the story, you have a completely different narrative. It's time to pop your filter bubble. Thank you.